Hello and welcome to another episode of Overlord Explained. I'm Shergog, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at Gazev and the first betrayal in Overlord that most of you likely have missed entirely, since you need to puzzle together all of the little details from the later events. But before we are going to do so, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. Now with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. Gazev Stronov was betrayed right at the beginning of Overlord, specifically in the first volume of the novel and in the first episodes of the anime. But unfortunately, the full picture of these events only started coming together in later volumes. In simple terms, Gazev Stronov was not meant to survive the Village of Khan arc, and his potential death wasn't only the doing of the theocracy. You probably noticed that Gazev Stronov, unlike in later battles against Demiurge's minions and against Ein Sulgon personally, didn't have the legendary sword of the Kingdom of Rhea's ties, Razor Edge, at his side during his desperate and almost fatal fight against the Sunlight Scripture. He used a different large sword, and his armor wasn't a legendary artifact of the kingdom either, but rather just sturdy metal armor, without any magical enchantments. The reason why Gazev Stronov lost access to these items was simply due to an intrigue. The nobles took these useful items away from him, and therefore making it way easier to wound and to kill him in combat. This was only possible because by the beginning of Volume 1 of Overlord, the power of King Ramposa had already been eroded so much by the powerful noble houses that the political pressure that they could exert was enough to deny Gazev Stronov the use of this legendary gear. Now, Gazev Stronov was not pleased about this, and to make matters worse, it wasn't just the aristocratic faction that made his life a living hell, because even within the royal faction, which supported Prince Zanek at court, there was a traitor among them, Marquis Bloom Rouge, a high-ranking noble who pretended to be loyal to the king, but was secretly a spy for the Empire of Baharut. Although the inner circle around King Ramposa and Prince Zanek were aware of this, and Renner also figured out what his true motives were, they couldn't easily execute him for high treason, even though it is a punishment that he deserved. This was due because it would alienate almost any noble supporting the king, because these nobles could not verify whether or not the accusations would be justified, and his death would be just. And they most likely would view it as the king clamping down on dissenters within his own faction. This would have cost him, if not the loyalty, then at the very least the political support of many nobles across all factions, because they would then switch from the royal to the aristocrat faction around Crown Prince Barbro, effectively robbing Ramposa of any political support, rendering him politically impotent. And it likely was this semi-secret spy that played a role in why Gazev couldn't equip the best armor of the kingdom. To clarify, the warrior troops under Gazev Stronov weren't also and that's why Marquis Bloom Rouge and many other great aristocrats of the kingdom could actually weaken the greatest and most valuable warrior that the kingdom had for self-defense. And the actions of the semi-secret spy, as well as the spite of many other great nobles, was the reason why Gazev Stronov was robbed of his greatest offense and defensive assets. And to clarify, the warrior troops under Gazev Stronov weren't civilians when they rode out in force to meet the forces of the Baharut Empire. Gazev Stronov himself might wear normal clothing on a regular day, or ceremonial uniform when at the king's side, but his warrior troop and he himself were dispatched to the border area of the Empire of Baharut to fight a battle, supposedly because imperial soldiers had destroyed entire villages there. So it was already clear to the nobles that Gazev was putting his own life on the line, and it was quite obvious that it could have been a trap, and it was possible that, for example, 3 out of the 4 Imperial Knights from Jerknev, or even Fluda Paradane, were waiting for the warrior troop, and that this was just an ambush. So denying Gazev his armor and his weapon was akin to aiding his murder. Fun fact, Gazev Stronov's warrior troop is also called the Royal Warrior Troop, and Gazev Stronov himself holds the title of Head Warrior. And this is because he isn't a noble, and the court would resist any attempt of the king or of any of his supporters to actually make him one. And this is not just because they are opposing nobles that want Crown Prince Barbaro on the throne, but even the royalist faction isn't necessarily pleased that a commoner enjoys the king's favor, as it undermines their own position. If the king started granting powerful positions to non-noble warriors, making them nobility themselves, or turning yet more commoners to officials and bureaucrats in very high positions normally reserved for the aristocracy, then the nobles, who still hold a significant power at court and are right now indispensable to the king, they would gradually lose their power and become replaceable, and ultimately superfluous. That's why they wouldn't want such a situation and such a commoner to arise. And with that said, let's get back to the topic at hand, because it is quite likely that at least Marquis Bloom Rouge knew about the ambush Gazev Stronov was about to face without his equipment. However, the spy for the Baharut Empire might have believed that the ambush was truly planned by the Baharut Empire itself, and not by members of the Sunlight Scripture, because it was the Sunlight Scripture members who dressed in imperial gear and invaded innocent villages, decimating a large portion of the population, and not the imperial legions under Jerknev. So much like how Marquis Bloom Rouge had betrayed the kingdom to work for the empire and secure even more power and influence after the victory of Jerknev, the theocracy probably exploited his duplicitous loyalty to make him work for them without his knowledge, and to set up an ambush on Gazev, or at least to strip Gazev of his equipment and weapons, thus making it far easier for the Sunlight Scripture to handle him, because Razor Edge would have had no problems dealing with angels, and his armor would greatly reduce any damage taken, and finally he would also be able to regenerate his health pool over and over, making him essentially a perpetual fighting machine, and therefore an utterly terrifying foe. And finally, what makes this all the more remarkable is that Gazev still went ahead. He must have sensed that this wasn't just a minor border conflict. He even discussed with his vice commander how the nobles took away his gear, and nevertheless, he knowingly went into a trap, driven by his duty towards his country and the protection of the people of Rhea's ties. Again, even though he knew that at least a part of the nobility wanted to see him dead. And it is this initial betrayal of Gazev that in my opinion needs to be emphasized and pointed out a lot more. And this was also a reason why I did not feel particularly bad for the kingdom of Rhea's ties after it was liberated by the Sorcerer Kingdom. Fun fact, Gazev was also the only representative sent by the kingdom who defended the village of Karen. The other officials, a tax collector and then finally Crown Prince Barbaro, were not there to aid the village. So again, the only good force that was sent to Karen was greatly weakened by the kingdom, which again also kind of contributed to the reason why the village of Karen was, how do I put it, not really against what Einsulgon did to the rest of the kingdom in volume number 14. And now with all of that said, it's your turn. Leave your thoughts and comments and ideas about Gazev, the Kingdom of Rhea's Ties, and the video down in the comment section. Anyway, have a nice day, and I say special thanks to Arder Daddy Arder, Bad Guy Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Beezer, Ben C, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Dragonlord Plaxi du Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Feralchivan, Guy with Dead Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Lelouch Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Loverazor, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, Oh Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pantom, Personage, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Cune Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rak Edsmeshar, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito 27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Xenokai und Sonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.